Today I'm going to read you two Sherlock Holmes short stories. The first one is called The Field Bazaar. Enjoy. I should certainly do it, said Sherlock Holmes. I started at the interruption, for my companion had been eating his breakfast with his attention entirely centered upon the paper, which was propped up by the coffee pot. Now I looked across at him to find his eyes fastened upon me with the half-amused, half-questioning expression which he usually assumed when he felt he had made an intellectual point. "Do what?" I asked. He smiled as he took his slipper from the mantelpiece and drew from it enough shag tobacco to fill the old clay pipe with which he invariably rounded off his breakfast. "A most characteristic question of yours, Watson," said he. "You will not, I am sure, be offended if I say that any reputation for sharpness which I may possess has been entirely gained by the admirable foil which you have made for me. Have I not heard of Devantes who have insisted upon plainness in their saffrons? There is a certain analogy." Our long companionship in the Baker Street rooms had left us on those early, easy terms of intimacy when much may be said without offence, and yet I acknowledge that I was nettled at his remark. "I may be very obtuse," said I, "but I confess that I am unable to see how you have managed to know that I was asked to help in the Edinburgh University Bazaar." "Precisely. The letter has only just come to hand, and I have not spoken to you since." "In spite of that," said Holmes, leaning back in his chair and putting his fingertips together, "I would even venture to suggest that the object of the bazaar is to enlarge the university cricket field." I looked at him in such bewilderment that he vibrated with silent laughter. "The fact is, my dear Watson, that you are an excellent subject," said he. "You are never blasé. You respond instantly to any external stimulus. Your mental processes may be slow, but they are never obscure. And I found during breakfast that you are easier reading than the leader in the Times in front of me." "I should be glad to know how you arrived at your conclusions," said I. "I fear that my good nature in giving explanations has seriously compromised my reputation," said Holmes. "But in this case, the train of reasoning is based upon such obvious facts that no credit can be claimed for it. You entered the room with a thoughtful expression, the expression of a man who is debating some point in his mind. In your hand you held a solitary letter. Now last night you retired in the best of spirits, so it was clear that it was this letter in your hand which had caused the change in you." "This is obvious." It is obvious when it is explained to you. I naturally asked myself what the letter could contain which might have this effect upon you. As you walked, you held the flap side of the envelope towards me, and I saw upon it the same shield-shaped device which I have observed upon your old college cricket cap. It was clear, then, that the request came from the Edinburgh University, or from some club connected to the university. When you reached the table, you laid down the letter beside your plate with the address uppermost, and you walked over to look at the framed photograph upon the left of the mantelpiece. It amazed me to see the accuracy with which he had observed my movement. "What next?" I asked. I began by glancing at the address, and I could tell, even at the distance of 6 feet, that it was an unofficial communication. This I gathered from the use of the word "doctor" upon the address, to which, As a Bachelor of Medicine, you have no legal claim. I knew that university officials are pedantic in their correct use of titles, and I was thus unable to say with certainty that your letter was unofficial. When on your return to the table you turned over your letter and allowed me to perceive that the enclosure was a printed one, the idea of a bazaar first occurred to me. I had already weighed the possibility of its being a political communication, but this seemed improbable in the present stagnant conditions of politics. When you returned to the table, your face still remained its expression, and it was evident that your examination of the photograph had not changed the current of your thoughts. In that case, it must itself bear upon the subject in question. I turned my attention to the photograph, therefore, and saw at once it consisted of yourself as a member of the Edinburgh University 11, with the pavilion and cricket field in the background. My small experience of cricket clubs has taught me that next to churches and cavalry inn signs, they are the most depth-leading things upon earth. When upon your return to the table, I saw you take out your pencil and draw lines upon the envelope, I was convinced that you were endeavoring to realize some projected improvement which was to be brought about by a reserve. Your face still showed some indecision, so that I was able to break it upon you with my advice that you should insist in so good an object. I could not help smiling at the extreme simplicity of his exclamation. Of course, it was as easy as possible, said I. My remark appeared to nettle him. I may add, said he, that the particular help which you have been asked to give was that you should write in their album, and that you have already made up your mind that the present incident will be the subject of your article. But how? I cried. It is as easy as possible, said he, and I leave its solution to your own ingenuity. In the meantime, he added, raising his paper, you'll excuse me if I return to this very interesting article upon the trees of Cremona, and the exact reasons for this preeminence in the manufacture of violins. It is one of those small outlying problems to which I am sometimes tempted to direct my attention. And that is the end of the first story for tonight. The second one, somewhat humorous, is called How Watson Learned the Trick. I hope you enjoy it. Watson had been watching his companion intently ever since he had sat down to the breakfast table. Holmes happened to look up and catch his eye. Well, Watson, what are you thinking about? He asked. About you. Me? Yes, Holmes, I was thinking how superficial are these tricks of yours, and how wonderful it is that the public should continue to show interest in them. I quite agree, said Holmes. In fact, I have a recollection that I have myself made a similar remark. Your method, said Watson severely, are really easily acquired. No doubt, answered Holmes with a smile. Perhaps you will yourself give an example of this method of reasoning. With pleasure, said Watson. I am able to say that you were greatly preoccupied when you got up this morning. Excellent, said Holmes. How could you possibly know that? Because you are usually a very tidy man, and yet you have forgotten to shave. Dear me, how very clever, said Holmes. I had no idea, Watson, that you were so apt a pupil. Has your eagle eye detected anything more? Yes, Holmes. You have a client named Barlow, and you have not been successful with his case. Dear me, how could you know that? I saw the name outside his envelope. When you opened it, you gave a groan and thrust it into your pocket with a frown on your face. Admirable. You're indeed observant. Any other points? I fear, Holmes, that you have taken to financial speculation. How could you tell that, Watson? You opened the paper, turned to the financial page, and gave a loud exclamation of interest. Well, that is very clever of you, Watson. Any more? Yes, Holmes. You have put on your black coat instead of your dressing gown, which proves that you are expecting some important visitor at once. Anything more? I have no doubt that I could find other points, Holmes, but I only give you these few in order to show you that there are other people in the world who can be as clever as you. And not some so clever, said Holmes. I admit that they are few, but I am afraid, my dear Watson, that I must count you among them. What do you mean, Holmes? Well, my dear fellow, I fear your deductions have not been so happy as I should have wished. You mean that I was mistaken? Just a little that way, I fear. Let us take the points in their order. I did not shave because I have sent my razor to be sharpened. I put on my coat because I have, worse luck, an early meeting with my dentist. His name is Barlow, and the letter was to confirm the appointment. The cricket page is beside the financial one, and I turned to it to find if Surrey was holding its own against Kent. But go on, Watson, go on. It's a superficial trick, and no doubt you will soon acquire it. Oh, poor Watson. He's never quite up to Holmes' intellect, but I think at times Holmes can be a little, well, quite rude to Watson. Watson is his best friend after all. But that seems to be their dynamic. Anyway, I hope you like these stories tonight, and I apologize for my blunders. Thank you for listening.